Hi, it's Steve, and I'm here once again with Dee Zimmerman. Hello, Dee.
Hi, Steve. Nice to be here with you today.
It's always a treat.
Yeah, it is.
So today we're talking about a topic of early retirement. And it's in the news because the current administration did recently make an offer to federal employees of taking early retirement. Although we know that early retirement has been an option for people in public service and people in private companies for a very long time, but it is a life event that does trigger certain questions and issues. So I think we're due for a refresher course on what those questions might be. So I would
Mm-hmm.
like to ask you, as a coach who has dealt with people who have been given that opportunity, what is in their mind and what are the questions that people should ask themselves when they are given that offer?
Mm-hmm. Right, right. Um, yeah. I mean, if they're offered early opportunity, it might be it might be great for them. But I think one of the questions that they need to ask themselves is where do we stand financially? And of course, being a financial coach, I mean, that's what I'm first going to think of too. But we certainly don't step into an early retirement unless it's forced upon us, and that is the case sometimes for people, a forced early retirement. But if this is an option, if this is a choice, okay, let's look at the whole picture of your financial situation. And are you financially secure? Are you positioned um, adequately to be able to take this opportunity? Um, that is the main question. Then there's a whole bunch of other questions that would follow, as in, what do you, whenever we look at this for people, whether it's early retirement or something they want to plan ahead of time for, what kind of life do they want after this? And we always call it retirement, but it's not retirement necessarily in a traditional way. It might be retirement as in like, well, this gives me an opportunity to maybe do different kind of work. I still want to be engaged in the working world, but maybe I can do something that I've always dreamt of doing or that I would enjoy more. Or maybe I work part-time, or maybe I do volunteer work. But the point is that it is different for everybody, what they might want this season in their life to look at. So that would be one of the first questions that we would talk about is, well, what are your expectations? How do you want to spend that time? And that instructs what they need, what their financial need is. Partly, how are we going to be able to finance that? If that means that we're going to work some or work part-time, then we can factor that in. We don't need quite as much nest egg or to draw from a nest egg in the beginning because we'll have some supplemental income. In looking at the whole financial picture, we then would look at, and this is something that I do when I coach people in retirement. I do some retirement coaching and also something that I call the Nest Egg playbook, and that I walk people through. Okay. So what the next step would be to look at what is their spending right now. What kind of lifestyle do they like living? And this is not the same from one person to the next. We've become accustomed to a certain way of lifestyle, and this is the way that we like to live, and that varies a lot from people, from uh, and is not always linked with the income that they bring in. But anyway, so we need to look at what they are spending currently um, to instruct what they may spend in the future. There are going to be some changes as you enter into a new season of life. Some expenses you won't have, some you'll have some new expenses. And as you age, that changes too what your expenses are. You'll have more healthcare costs, more travel maybe, but less of supporting children and things like that. So we look at, just to kind of refresh, we look at what do you want your retirement to look at? What is your current spending? How might that change as you enter into the season of life? And then, shall I go on with some of the other steps?
Let me ask a question first.
You bet.
Um, do you actually do scenarios to address different options? Like if somebody asks you, well, I'd like to not have to work, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to afford it. So can you actually run some calculations and determine whether they can afford to not work or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great to kind of walk through. Um, this can even allow people to think outside the box and go, you know what? Maybe I don't need to work as much. Maybe I can accept that early retirement. But people who aren't even faced with this decision, but are just, continuing to be in the work field, it's great to stop and pause and take a look at that to see where do I stand financially, because maybe I have some opportunity to cut back a little bit on work or to make that shift. Um, but yes, I would take a look at what their options are. If they want to retire early or maybe change jobs, what are they going to need? What do they need to bring in still? And um, see if that is going to be necessary or whether they can just completely leave the working field entirely. I think that's a great thing to look at, whether they're faced with the early retirement option or not. But definitely, if they have that in front of them, then we've got to take a look at what their options are. Can I completely leave, or do I need to have some kind of supplemental income coming in?
Along with what's in front of you, I guess they
Yeah.
need to give you an accounting of benefits that they've had with their current employer that they might
Sure.
now have to pay for themselves, and
Right.
you'd have to factor those expenses into the picture to see if retirement is affordable or not, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yep, yep. And that's in the discussion about what are your expenses now and what will your expenses be in the future.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so you would absolutely look at what are the benefits that they're provided with right now with their job, and what will they have to pay for those same benefits were they not to be given that by their employer. Yeah, and that is in the discussion of expenses. What do you spend now? What will you have to spend in the future?
Okay. And you were
Yeah.
going to talk about sub-steps. What are the additional sub-steps you were thinking?
Yeah, so we've looked at what they want this season in their life to be for them, and what they spend and what they might have to spend in the future. So the next step is something like this, Steve, too, where we look at what kind of sources of income do they have? Would they continue to have? Um, and in the way I've explained it is what will your paycheck be in retirement?
Right.
So, yep, after you step away, are there any other supplemental sources of income? Some people do have a pension. Sometimes you get an early pension, you're provided that. Not too many anymore. But do you have other sources? Maybe you've got real estate. Some people do have that, and that will continue. That won't stop when you leave the working force. Um, or are there other sources of income that you could create if you need to? When you evaluate, could we think outside the box where you could create some sources of income that you don't already have that could supplement? Of course, there's Social Security, depending on what age you want to take that. That would be in your future. And so taking a look at what that is too, and piecing that all together to see um, what I call that is a gap, your um, your gap need. So when we look at what kind of income might come in from other sources, that paycheck, then what is the gap need based on what you think you're going to spend? in that season of life, having evaluated expenses and new expenses and expenses that fall off. Where does your paycheck come up short? And that is your gap need. And I know this is kind of getting further ahead, maybe, Steve, but that gap need instructs us in what your nest egg needs to be, right?
Hmm.
You've got to make up for that. And so that is what your retirement savings needs to be. You'll have sources of income, but you need more than that. So that's going to come from your own savings, your own nest egg. And so then, if I have people coming, and this is what I did recently, we looked at all of these things with this a couple, and she was faced with this opportunity, if you want to call it that, for early retirement. Um, and we also looked then at what they had already saved up. And this is where a financial planner can really be great because they have the software to really get some specifics on that. But I can go a long ways with that. And just there are general rules of thumb. There's the 4% withdrawal rule. There's the $1,000 income need rule. And there are ways to just kind of ballpark it. I'm not going to have the fancy software. I use a DIY software program that's really quite good that everybody can subscribe to, and it's quite amazing. It's I think they changed their name to Bolden Boldin Retirement. But we can absolutely take a snapshot of what they have already saved and make some estimates of what that would provide on a monthly basis, income wise. And does that fill the gap need? If it does, then they're in pretty good shape. It's pretty evident taking a look at that after we've gone through those first few steps, taking a look at that and determining whether they're safe to retire yet or not.
You mentioned earlier that early retirement, on the one hand, can be optional, but it could also be mandatory. That
Yeah,
is a
I did.
practice with some companies.
Yeah,
So, is it
yeah.
safe to assume that with some people that you see, if they're forced to retire early, there's some kind of emotional fallout in terms of maybe feelings of betrayal or disappointment or surprise and
Mm,
shock? And if so, do you
yeah,
have to deal with that as you coach them financially?
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, they're dealing with emotional insecurity. I mean, like this is changing their identity, right? They're having to enter into a new season of life forced upon them. And this, right, identity shift. I mean, that is taken away from them. And I think that's tough. Yeah.
So does that slow down the process you work them through, or to what extent would that impact your process
Yeah.
of helping them fill the gap?
Yeah. I think it definitely can slow them down. I think that um, now financial insecurity causes a lot of stress. So in the mix of all of that is this shock and this real concern about their financial security because they're being forced into the situation. So I would not hesitate to jump right into, okay, where do you stand financially? Because if we find out that they are okay and I can provide them some reassurances, that can go a long ways to reducing their stress. And then I think opening up their eyes to, well, this might just be a gift. So my approach would be, hey, this is what life brought you, right? Let's convert whatever life brings us into a gift. And I would definitely, that would be my kind of coaching hat, right? That life coaching sort of side of things is converting those things into something really positive. So life brought you this. How are we going to make the most of it? We'll take a look at the money where they stand financially. And if they're not in a good spot, we will make the best of it. And we will come up with some other opportunities, like you mentioned earlier, Steve, where where might there be a way to bring in supplemental income? Let's think outside the box. And maybe that's where the opportunity is. It's like, well, I've always kind of wanted to do that. Or, maybe I'll start a business and this could be, something that could be just really engaging and fulfilling. Sometimes when we've been forced into a situation, it turns out to be the best, doesn't it? Turns out to be a gift. So I would definitely be looking for those opportunities. And as far as identity goes too, the emotional, um, just opening up their mind to what could this mean as far as who I could be, and I've always identified myself that way, but how could I reinvent myself in some really, really neat ways? But yeah, it's a that's a tough process though, isn't it? To have that forced upon you and that forced reflection.
Well, I mean, by the same token, people don't ask for disabilities or death or
Right.
fires or any other life event that could cause a
Yeah.
setback. So,
Yeah.
this just kind of becomes part of anything in that group. So we all have to deal with something that is either going to be make us go back or help us go forward, depending on the attitude that
Mhm.
you're talking about.
Mhm.
So I get this. That's a good overview of what you're doing. It's very interesting, and it also highlights the the particular skill set of a coach to do a little bit of attitude coaching along the lines of what we're describing to kind of make lemonade out of lemons type of thing.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm grateful coaches are as common now as you guys are, because people actually need to develop a certain attitude about life if they're going to make smart financial decisions. And a lot of people in financial services, including insurance guys, are kind of transactional oriented, and it's an uphill climb to get clients having a perspective on things. And here, that's part and parcel of your practice. So, hooray for
Yeah.
coaches! I think there should be more coaches.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And it's that side of things. It's both sides of things. I think one of the things that makes me unique, but I imagine that a lot of coaches too are like this, although where I fall is kind of a balance between the life coaching side of things, the mindset um, around money and the practical systems. We need them both to be successful, to not live with financial stress, and to have
Sure.
that confidence. We need it both. We need them both. So I think yeah, I think that is what we offer, and I think sometimes financial planners and financial advisors do offer that too, but fewer. They're not going to be they're not on the coaching side as much, and I think that yeah, that is true when people are going through these changes. Sometimes they may not feel as comfortable going to a financial planner because you may get somebody who will listen to you and really holistically kind of address some of those things, but more often not. Um,
It's true.
they have their strengths, they have their specialties, and they have their and great gifts that they offer people. But yeah, I think that's rather intimidating for a lot of people because they may or may not get that. So we fill that gap for them. Mhm.
Bravo. How
Yeah.
would you like to wrap things up for us?
How would I like to wrap things up for this? Don't be afraid of what life brings you. Be a surfer, adapt to the waves and the wind. Not necessarily what you asked for, but don't feel deflated and discouraged. Get help if you need. Take a look at that early retirement. Hopefully, it was just an opportunity and it's not a must. Um, and take it as an opportunity to evaluate your financial situation as well as your life situation. What do you really want? How do you make the most out of your life? Hmm.
Amen, sister. Well said.
Okay.
Thank you, Dee.
You're welcome. Thanks, Steve.
Bye bye.